Hello, we are back with our third session of this week. We are going to finish section 3 and consequently chapter 9 of our book. This section's title is The Federalists in Charge, and as you studied in the previous lessons, George Washington governed America for 2 terms, 4 years from 1789 to 1797, and he served as a symbol of national unity. But finally, because of the pressures coming from every side, he decided to resign. Not to resign, but not to run for another president. In his farewell speech, Washington warned the people against political parties. He believed that political parties will divide the nations into 2 opposite sections. However, after Washington left the presidency, the people chose political parties. We come to a term foreign policy. Foreign policy shows the relation of a government with other countries. Washington urged the Americans to remain neutral when it comes to foreign policy. Actually, George Washington, before leaving the office, warned Americans of 2 dangers. Number 1 danger was the alliance and dependence on the foreign countries. The second one was that the parties would divide the nations into two opposite forces, and the unity between Americans might demolish. And actually, in his farewell speech, he said, "Steer clear of permanent alliance with any portion of the foreign world." And it was from this advice that Americans took from Washington's presidency. Unfortunately, after George Washington left the office, the Americans were completely divided over how to run the nation. They disagreed with how to interpret the Constitution and economic policy, and actually these disagreements were between 2 major characters, Hamilton and Jefferson. Hamilton wanted a strong central government. He also wanted a nation in which trade, manufacturing, and cities could grow. Finally, Hamilton's political ideas came to form the political party known as the Federalists. These Federalists were mostly from northern merchants and manufacturers. On the other hand, Jefferson and Madison, they formed the Democratic Republican Party. They feared that a strong central government would make a tyranny, another dictatorship. They wanted a nation that prospered from planters and farmers. In other terms, Jefferson and Madison, they supported a kind of traditional way of living for America, but Hamilton was actually the opposite, because he wanted a kind of modern America that could trade with other countries, especially with Europeans. As you see here, 2 political parties form. Number 1 is Federalist, the other one is Democratic Republican. Federalists used to believe in a strong national government. They had the fear of mob rule. Mob rule means the ruling of some corrupt people or more powerful people. But on the other hand, the Democratic Republicans, they wanted limited national government. They feared rule by one person or a powerful few. It means that some dictators might come into power and destroy the unity that they had. Federalists used to have a loose interpretation of the Constitution. They were not very strict. They favored a national bank, and their economy was based on manufacturing and ships. In fact, the supporters of Federalists were lawyers, merchants, manufacturers, and religious groups. Democratic Republicans, they were exactly opposite in that they had the strict interpretation of the Constitution. They opposed a national bank, and their economy was based on farming. Their supporters were farmers and tradespeople. John Adams takes office. The Federalists chose John Adams, George Washington's vice president, as the nominee. He was an experienced public servant, and he was a leader during the Revolution War, and he was also a member at the Continental Congress. He had the experience of being diplomat for France, Netherlands, and Britain. The Democratic Republican on the other side chose Thomas Jefferson. The Constitution stated that the runner-up in the presidential race would become the vice president. Adams became the president with Jefferson as his vice president. Adams became the first president to govern from the nation's new capital, from Washington, D.C. Problems with France. Back then, there was a kind of chaotic relationship between France and the United States. In fact, Britain and France were at war with one another, but the France began taking American ships, making it impossible to trade with Britain. Some of the Federalists wanted to call war on France. President John Adams, on the other hand, did not want to call war. Instead, he sent 3 men to meet with the Prime Minister of France, Charles Pinckney. These representatives were Charles Pinckney, Gary, and John Marshall. They met with 3 French agents, and back then it was mentioned XYZ. They met these XYZ. They met with Americans and told them that the only way that they could meet was to get bribery from Americans. They said that the Americans were supposed to pay $10 million to France and $250,000 to the Prime Minister. The XYZ affair became known in America, and in 1797 it was made public in America. Congress cancelled all treaties with France and then began taking friendships. Alliance and Sedition Acts. The relations with France caused problems between the two parties. They called each other names and laid the blame on the others for what was happening between France. Democratic Republicans called Adams the tyrant of America. In turn, Adams blamed the Democratic Republicans, newspapers, and the new immigrants. To silence the criticism, he passed a law known as the Alien and Sedition Act. This law was an act that targeted aliens, people who were not yet citizens, and it had 4 important sub-rules. Number 1 was that he increased the waiting time to become a citizen from 5 to 14 years. Number 2 was the president can arrest disloyal aliens. Number 3, he could order them out of country in time of the war. And finally, this was outlawing any saying or writing that goes against the government. Under this act, many people were thrown into jail and many Democratic Republican editors were charged. States' rights. States had the right that the government could not violate. Jefferson and Madison were looking for ways to nullify. Nullify means to take away the negativity of the Alien and Sedition Acts. They wanted to cancel this act. They did so by creating the Virginia Resolutions. In that, the states could interpose or place itself between the Federalist government and its citizens. They said that the Alien and Sedition Acts violated the rights of the Constitution. No other states actually supported the resolution, but soon the Democratic Republicans took control over the Congress and led the acts. Peace with France. Coming to the end of his term as president, Adams open-talked with France again. They signed the Convention of 1800, which stopped all naval attacks. The Federalists did not like what Adams did, and it saved America from America from war, and consequently Adams lost the second term for running for the president. Jefferson became the third president of the United States, and the era of Thomas Jefferson starts after the presidency of John Adams. This is the end of chapter 9. I hope you study the section in details. These two sections, these two chapters 8 and 9, they're very important, especially for your exam. So please stay focused and study hard. Take care of yourself and your family. See you. Goodbye.